"Water's good enough for poor folks," grumbled Sarah, the future mother-in-law of my daughter. Her crudeness was uncomfortable, and I couldn't disguise it. Was anything like this actually taking place? Not long after Sophia, my daughter's future sister-in-law, became pale and turned to face me. I only grinned a little. "I'm Bella Rowland, and this year marks my 54th birthday. When our daughter Caroline was 3 years old, I filed for divorce from my ex-husband. Irreconcilable conflicts led to our divorce. He refused to work and drank all day. Despite all I said, he remained the same, and our financial condition deteriorated. I decided to divorce him because I didn't want a family like that. We didn't pay alimony or child support after our divorce. It's just been Caroline and myself ever since. Up to the divorce, I was a homemaker and had to raise Caroline by myself. Desperately, I went to work. I had to take on work-from-home gigs at first because I couldn't leave little Caroline home alone and needed to make ends meet. Life was hard, requiring continual savings due to poor salaries and long hours worked. There have been instances when I went without food because I ran out of money before payday. I raised Caroline to maturity despite the difficulties. Now that Caroline was a working adult, I had more free time and began working longer hours. I started making handcrafted things by utilizing my knowledge of basic jobs, and gradually it became a profitable company. My personal life has also transformed. Caroline started dating Mark, her employer and 5 years her senior, not long after she started working at her firm. Caroline gave me a picture of Mark, and he looked like a nice young man. Caroline seems to have taken heed of her father's poor example, since Mark strikes one as a serious individual. I'm overjoyed that Caroline has discovered happiness. I have decided to live my life as I see fit now that I am in my latter years. That was my belief until Caroline said, "Mom, I need to talk to you about something," one evening after dinner. Caroline quietly approached me with such hesitation, to which I replied, "What's the rush? You don't seem right. What is happening?" And with humility, Caroline announced, "I'm going to marry Mark." "Are you serious? That's fantastic. Many congratulations." I let out a cry. I had hoped that Mark would resemble the guy in the picture, even though I haven't actually seen him yet and don't know what type of person he is. "Mom, I'm happy you feel that way. I was afraid you would disagree with it," Caroline remarked, clearly happy that I didn't disagree with her choice. Caroline then offered an idea. "So I was hoping you could meet Mark this weekend." She wanted me to get to know him before they tied the knot. She probably wanted to introduce him to me to relieve my worries, knowing how serious Caroline was. I gave a strong nod. "Okay, let me go meet Mark." I responded, "I want to see what type of guy he is." Caroline appeared content and relieved. Mark and I agreed to get together next Sunday. I waited at home that Saturday shortly before 11 o'clock a.m. for Caroline and Mark. When the doorbell rang, I answered it to find Caroline and Mark waiting for me. "It's good to meet you. Mark Fredman," I said. "Hello, I'm Mark Fredman, and I'm engaged to Caroline." His politeness gave me a little sense of relief. Caroline is my solitary, priceless daughter. Her boyfriend is a good man, which pleases me. I invited them inside and said, "Please come in." Upon coming into our family, Mark continued to seem like a nice young guy. He smiled as he told the tale of how he and Caroline met and brought along some well-known brand candies as a present. "Stop it, Mark. You're making me seem bad." Caroline blushed. It was nice to see her this way. But the friendly atmosphere was to shift in an instant. "By the way, is your father at work today?" Mark questioned, his gaze a little bewildered as he cast an inquisitive glance about. His inquiry surprised me, and I looked at Caroline, who appeared a little pale. Most likely she hadn't disclosed to Mark that she was raised by a single mother. Caroline made a mistake by keeping it a secret, especially in light of the stigma single moms sometimes experience in conventional homes. I prepared myself to lay forth the circumstances. Caroline might not have mentioned it, but I'm divorced and a single mother, I said. For an instant, Mark's once smiling visage became expressionless. What's wrong? I questioned, nervous. I wondered if it was a good idea for me to tell him. However, Mark was grinning once more in a second. It is not necessary. He continued to smile and replied, Please don't worry. Is that so? I said, cocking my head in confusion. Mark's shift in expression perplexed me, but I didn't ask questions. The conversations about marriage went well after that. Caroline said enthusiastically, What kind of dress should I choose? She seemed to be enjoying preparing for the wedding. Which color, Mom, do you think is best for me? I answered, Well, maybe a color you like, but I still didn't feel completely comfortable. At that moment, Mark's expression became blank, and I never forgot it. Maybe his family has strong opinions about being a single parent, so I questioned Caroline. What did Mark say about our home being headed by a single mother on the way back that day? Perhaps his parents are against his marriage to you. Caroline said, looking perplexed, Mom, he didn't mention anything remarkable. Do you not worry excessively? Caroline said something, and I was unable to inquire after that. Still, my intuition was correct. It took place one evening. Caroline yelled out, Mom, as soon as she got back, her face pretty serious. Surprised, I said to her, Caroline, why such a depressing face? Has anything occurred? I questioned Caroline, but she said nothing. Caroline, always so upbeat, didn't usually seem so disturbed. It took a while before Caroline stood up. She looked sorrowful as she remarked, It appears that Mark's family isn't too happy about our marriage. Why? Because your family is headed by a single mother. I posed a serious query. They believe Mark won't succeed since we come from a low-income, single-parent household. It's a terrible thing to say. Caroline nodded quietly. It would be really difficult to hear such things from the in-laws. The course of events angered me. They shouldn't presume that just because we are a single-mother household, we are impoverished. Although we've faced difficulties, our lives are now typical. Like any male, I work really hard. Then Caroline revealed something astounding to me. Mark's sister also said some things. I questioned, Like what? Caroline, appearing disappointed, added, She said we're just after Mark's money, that they can't accept us as family. Her expression was so lonely. These blunt remarks must have hurt Caroline deeply. It's awful that before ever having met me, people would say such things about me. The parents of Mark are unbelievable. What was said at that moment by Mark? I inquired. I thought back to Mark's face the last time he visited our home. Perhaps he was picturing his family's response, which is why he was so expressionless. It appears Mark stood up for me. There is a lot of prejudice in his family against single moms. I became concerned about what was ahead. Caroline said, Mark stood up for me. Since Mark and I work for the same firm, I would never ask for money. I was relieved. Without thinking, I found myself replying, That's reassuring if Mark is on your side. I would have been concerned for Caroline's future if Mark had taken the side of his family rather than standing up for her. Even though she would likely still have to deal with hurtful comments from his family, it felt a little easier to have Mark on her side. A few days later, Caroline proposed that Mark's family and she have a family gathering before the wedding. Mom, before the wedding, I would like to meet with Mark's family. I truly apologize, she stated. Caroline said that Sarah had suggested it. At the very least, say hello to your fiance's parents. I take it your mother is that sensible? Someone informed her. Not that Mark and I could say no. Caroline remarked, I'm sincerely sorry, expressing her regret and consideration for me. We were meeting with his family to introduce Caroline to his family for marriage. To be honest, I was unsure of what they would say. Even though I wasn't very excited about going, it felt appropriate to honor the courtesy. "It's okay," I said, in agreement. Then came the day of the marriage introduction. Caroline and I had dinner at a restaurant close to his parents' residence. Caroline informed me that Sarah had stated, "We can't have you in our house when you're not married yet," which is why there was a restaurant. Isn't there a classy eatery close by that would be suitable? A course lunch at the restaurant Sarah selected costs $300 per person. I rarely go there alone. I only go there on occasion for work. Sarah's choice of eatery baffled me. It appears that Sarah had also selected a nearby cafe for Caroline's initial introduction to the family. Furthermore, Caroline ended up covering Sarah's dinner costs as well. Sarah said, "It makes sense since you're getting married to my son. It seems that Mark paid the lunch bill back afterward." Even though Sarah is the one who invited us to the marriage, why does she act so haughtily toward us? I could not shake the uneasy feeling I had. However, Caroline will undoubtedly face criticism for being impolite if I, her mother, decline at this time. Caroline may have discomfort after being married. I grudgingly agreed to the suggestion as a result. I applied a little makeup and made my way to the assigned location. For work, I normally wear a lot of makeup, but today I decided to go more natural. I also dressed much more subtly than I usually do since I didn't want to give the appearance that I was lavish. Modest clothing seemed sensible because we're greatly being accused of chasing Mark's money. Thinking these things over, Caroline and I walked into the fancy restaurant and the waiters showed us to a private room. Mark opened the door to see his family inside. Mark said, "Caroline, Bella, thank you for coming today," with grace. I said, "Thank you for today as well," in response to Mark. Next, I had to deal with his sister, Sophia, Mother Sarah, and Father David. They stared down on Caroline and me with a disapproving sneer. We could see right away that his family did not welcome us. I was extra cautious when I welcomed them. "We appreciate you sharing your valuable time with us today. I'm Caroline's mother, Bella. I'm glad to have met you." Sarah then grinned ill and stated, "I'd rather not have any further association, you know." Mark called Sarah Mom, but she didn't appear to mind. Being a single parent is difficult enough. You must be having financial difficulties. Sarah looked at my entire wardrobe and chuckled mockingly, "Even your clothes are so plain." My effort at modest clothing had not gone well. And Sophia laughed and spat abuses at him. "You might have wed a respectable person." Mark, poor guy, had to raise an impoverished mother and daughter. Sophia's remark irritated me. That kind of thing was inappropriate for a first encounter, but I couldn't ruin Caroline's marriage. "Pardon me," I said as I grudgingly took a seat. I think the Sophias and the in-laws taught me was funny because I didn't respond. Caroline gave me a worried look, while Mark, who was obviously conscious of his manners, had his brows knitted, appearing a little incensed at his family's lack of etiquette. Sarah was quite happy today. "A course meal has been reserved. It's $300, Sarah informed Sophia with excitement. "Are you serious? We have to eat a lot because the courses here are so costly, so I'm looking forward to that," Sophia said, her joy contagious. David gave a happy nod as well. The crew eventually brought the dishes. It was a vibrant show of appetizers. There were 3 different kinds of amuse-bouche on one platter, and they all looked extremely appetizing. But all I could see in front of me was water. Eh? The workers had left the room when I went to summon them back. I had just the lake in front of me as a sobering reminder. Mark was astounded by what he saw. Sophia laughed mockingly, knowing what was about to happen. Caroline saw it too and exclaimed, "Mom," with alarm. Then Sarah gave a nasty little laugh in the following second. "Those who are poor can survive on water alone," she remarked, grinning crassly. My discomfort at her swearing was evident. "What does this mean?" I inquired with Sarah. We had been invited to this restaurant by the in-laws, but they had no intention of treating us well. Inside, I was really upset. After glancing at me, Sarah seemed happy and chuckled. I was furious, but she didn't seem to mind. It appeared to please her. "Are you so dumb? On top of being a poor single mother, did you honestly believe that someone as useless as you would be accepted?" I was insulted by Sarah. As if it was anticipated, David nodded. "Are you not embarrassed about being a single parent, a lady that her spouse abandoned? You are a flawed person. You know how a simple woman like you becomes unnecessary." David uttered a coarse chuckle, not because my former spouse abandoned me, but because David's presumption was exclusive. In my opinion, this is simply remarkable for a human person. Sophia laughed heartily as well. "I don't want to become the low-wage worker that Caroline's mother was, despite being a woman." She regarded me with contempt and remarked, "It's truly awful," without any feminine appeal. "Mom, I'm sorry." Caroline appeared on the verge of tears. She needs to take accountability for placing me in this challenging circumstance. Caroline was staring down, and I could take no more of this. Seeing myself as such a laughingstock, I had to say something. "Perhaps it's time to take revenge." Mark let out a loud cry at that point, saying, "Enough, enough. Aren't you all embarrassed as grown-ups, banding together against Caroline's mother?" Mark defended me, which astonished me. Mark. Caroline seems astonished as well. Mark was furious at his family and flushed. Sarah and the others, though, displayed no regret. With a cheerful giggle, Sarah said, "It is unnecessary to stand up for the underprivileged." Why is Mark so irate at this point? David gave a strong nod. It appeared that Mark's remarks had little impact on them. His parents baffled me. They must be free of common sense. Maybe it's time to launch a counteroffensive. I had a last-minute plan that would shock my in-laws. Sophia turned to gaze at my face at that point. In the end, I glared at Sophia. Then, "Oh, could it be?" was whispered by Sophia. Then Sophia's face became white, and she turned to face me. She seems to have finally grasped my true identity. I smiled just a little bit. Sophia was shaking as she looked at me. "No way," she said, seeing her response. David questioned Sophia, looking perplexed. "What's up with you? You've been behaving strangely for some time now." Sarah glanced at Sophia as well, taken aback. "You have ghostly paleness. Do you feel all right?" Sarah worriedly spoke to Sophia. Sophia continued to tremble despite this. In light of what Sophia discovered, it makes sense. "Dad, your company is Globe Crafts, right?" Sophia then questioned David. Sophia glanced toward David in need of validation. Globe Crafts employs over 100 people and is a small to medium-sized business. I know Globe Crafts, and the pay isn't comparable to those of large corporations. I am aware of it since it has to do with my line of work. "So what's this all of a sudden?" laughed David. Despite my appearance, I put a lot of effort into my position as the sales manager. David went on, "You were hired by our firm as a part-time employee, didn't I, using my connections? Be appreciative." David chuckled. "That's correct," Sophia said, her expression dejected. Perplexed, David questioned Sophia. "But why are you asking this? Since you are a regular employee and this poor guy is probably employed part-time, are you attempting to brag?" David cast a nasty glance at me. I swore in my heart, this man is going to face a dire situation. With a little sigh, Sophia started talking, asking, "Dad, don't you know the company's clients?" "The company's clients?" David questioned, perplexed. As a housewife who didn't appear to grasp much, Sarah looked shocked. With hesitation, Sophia said, "I've previously met Caroline's mother within the organization. At the time, she was wearing more makeup, so I didn't immediately identify her." David seemed perplexed. "Inside the firm, what do you mean? I'm sure I recognize the faces of all the workers, even the part-timers, but that elderly woman is not one." Being labeled an older lady made me scowl, but David didn't appear to notice. He was frantically trying to recall anything when he heard the phrase, "inside the company." I hadn't talked to David personally, though, so it makes sense if he hadn't remembered. While I was thinking this, Sophia started to apologize. "Caroline's mother, I'm softly sorry for what happened." The in-laws became irate upon witnessing Sophia's actions. Why offer an apology? Saying sorry to someone who is so impoverished is unnecessary. Sarah remarked, "You're correct. Are you really so humble to apologize to someone this way?" Sophia was yelled at by David. Sophia gave her parents a stern look. "Dad, Mom, Caroline's mother is actually very wealthy, much more than Dad could ever be." "What did you say?" It must have come as a shock to hear such a thing from his own daughter, as David stared at Sophia. Sarah also responded to Sophia's remark by yelling nearly frantically, "How could you say that?" For the simple explanation, Caroline's mother is the president, Sophia said with a resigned air. "You know I've offered her tea at the business reception." "You know Harry's bags." David was shocked to hear that name. He then craned to get a better look at me. I grinned on purpose. David's complexion went white. "Baggies that Harry owned. Isn't that the company that the president ultimately persuaded to participate in the planned collaboration?" David queried. Then Sarah let out a cry. "Harry's bags? Is that the person who frequents department stores with bags?" Sarah looked over her luggage several times and added, "Even my bag is from there." We walked into the private area of this restaurant, and beneath Sarah's chair, I saw a familiar bag that she was holding very carefully. It's ill-mannered in a fancy restaurant, but she must so filially love her purse. "Isn't that a magazine giveaway?" I asked Sarah, grinning. "It is a privilege for you to use my brand." Red in the face, Sarah glanced down, mortified. The fact that her bag was identified as a magazine giveaway must have made her feel humiliated. I searched inside my wallet and removed my business card. "I am Bella Harry, the representative of Harry Bags." The in-laws looked closely at the business card. David was shaking as he was staring at the business card, saying, "To think you were actually the president." Sarah seemed astonished. "We were supposed to collaborate with Globe Crafts, but it seems like that arrangement won't be possible anymore," I added, observing the two as they stared silently at the business card. "What a shame." When David heard this, he appeared troubled. "Why?" "The president's most significant project to date has been teamwork. Our firm will if we decide to terminate it," David muttered, shaking with terror. "What's going on?" Confused, Sarah asked David. "In actuality, Globe Crafts is in a risky financial position," acknowledged David. "Fewer people are educated about handcrafted goods now than in the past. My mother used to sew everything by hand when I was little, but nowadays there are a lot of inexpensive Sophia-made items available. Perhaps an indication of the times. Globe Crafts has seen a sharp decline in sales year over year as a result of this trend. The partnership was suggested by Globe Crafts' president as a way to improve the company's terrible circumstances. I have, however, worked with a lot of well-known companies, so to be quite honest, I wasn't all that interested in working with a small to medium-sized business like Globe Crafts. I turned down the president's offer at first, but in the end, his zeal won me over and I accepted. We chose to work with Globe Crafts to produce bags, however. That is no longer the case. David was shaking a bit. He must be afraid of what is ahead. Ignoring David, I said, "It didn't seem like the partnership with Globe Crafts was socially beneficial. It was the president's excitement that touched me. However, a business that despises Caroline," I cast a chilly look at David. I was staring at David, making him sweat. Then he apologized to me the following minute. David's apologies left Sarah perplexed, so she inquired, "What? Why are you expressing?" "Regret." David pleaded for my pardon. The fact that David apologized startled Caroline and Mark as well. David apologized sincerely, not giving a damn about how it appeared. David's apologies struck a chord with me. An apology, after all, only occurs when he understands that my role is only self-defense. There isn't any sincere regret there. An apology now, after you've looked down on Caroline and me all this time, I said in an icy-cold voice. After everything, to believe that an apology would be adequate, David must have an excessively positive outlook. Then David got up swiftly, understanding that his apologies would not change the course of events. After all, it was only a performance. "You'll forgive us, right? We're going to be family," Sarah murmured, staring at me in confusion. She looked at me and stated that flippantly. Sarah went on, "I love Harry's bags after that. I'll receive certain items for free because we're family, right?" Sarah gave me a hopeful expression in her eyes. I was speechless, too shocked to speak. With a scowl and a firm discipline, Mark remarked, "Mom, that's just too convenient." That statement was totally out of line, even for Sarah. Saraha, however, seemed unable to comprehend and said, "Why not? There should be plenty of merchandise on hand. It wouldn't harm to distribute a few." With frustration, Sophia cast a disapproving glance at Sarah. I explained to Sarah that given that you are unfamiliar with us, our products are not freely given away. This reply appeared to annoy Sarah. "We're family because Caroline and Mark are getting married. Since you're the president, a family should support you financially," she stated, sarcastically, displaying no regret for her previous contemptuous demeanor. Finally lacking patience, Mark went up to Sarah. "Mom, you seem to have a different mindset. Merely because you learned that Caroline's mother is the president. Are you not embarrassed?" Sarah shrugged it off, even though his face was flushed with guilt. "It is irrelevant. A president has to be endowed with an abundance of wealth. You might certainly share a little with us. Even if Caroline and Mark get married, I have no intention of forming any ties with you," I said to Sarah in a low voice. Sarah attempted to win me over, surprised. "Avoid saying that, Mark, and I will become family when we get married. Giving up a bag or two hence shouldn't be problematic." I answered, furious, when Mark moved to be in the way. I knew Bella was the president, but I kept silent, knowing my parents would bother her if they found out, Mark said, looking disturbed. David expressed remorse at hearing Mark's admission. Mark glared at me and said, "You knew that if you had told me, I would have acted just like Mom. How could you talk like that to your parents? If you continue this way, you will be rejected." David yelled back, "You'll see how it feels if you keep up with this." Caroline seems perplexed by their conversation. "I'm okay with being disowned," murmured Mark. "I'll cut all communication with you. After everything we've done to raise you, why would you say such a thing?" A horrified Sarah said. Sophia and David were shocked as they looked at Mark. They did not anticipate his outburst. "I want to make Caroline happy in the future," Mark said. "I don't need a family that doesn't care for Caroline and Bella." Tears filled Sarah's eyes. Socializing how awful it must be to be shunned by their darling son, David and Sophia were taken aback. But I also reminded them that Sarah and the other in-laws were the only ones to blame for this predicament. "Leave your regrets behind." I smiled slightly and replied, "I'm sure you'll suffer in the future." Caroline addressed her in-laws directly as she continued, saying, We won't even let you know if we have children. Please save us from the suffering of missing the grandchild." Sarah let out a pained cry in return. Mark said something about us being a family, but David and Sophia tried to hold on to us, almost like they were crying. Caroline, Mark, and I walked out of the restaurant, ignoring them. I found out the next day that Sophia and David had been let go by the firm. I let Globcraft's president know that I wanted to end our partnership. The president tried to get me to remain many times, but I refused. I could not work for a firm that hired people who were capable of such contempt. I understood the president's wish to keep his business afloat, but given David and his allies' participation, I was unable to support it. The president was incensed when he learned of my choice. It came out that he was unable to forgive David and Sophia's behavior, and that he had a daughter who was around Caroline's age. Globcrafts relied heavily on our partnership, and Sophia and David's actions had put it in jeopardy. Sophia was employed by David because of his connections, even though David was a Sophiati of legal age. It would be extremely difficult for them to get a new job after being fired from Globcrafts. Mark, their loan provider, had all Sophiati severed his ties with housewife Sarah. The in-laws begged us to work with Globcrafts when they came directly to our business to negotiate. "The president will rehire me if you succeed. If you are unable to collaborate, kindly provide financial assistance. Families support one another despite the sorrow in ours." Their pathetic cries were ridiculous. It was obvious that they had no right to seek assistance after sophiating others like inferiors and then abruptly declaring themselves to be family. I was quite clear that I could not provide financial help or collaborate. I advised them to go right away, because Mark had cut his relationship with them as well. The in-laws attempted to hold on to me by refusing to go. "Do not appear in front of me again," I said sternly. "I'll call the cops if you do." David pleaded, "Please, not the police," at the mention of the police. Not what awaits Sophia. With reluctance, they decided not to come back and took Sarah with them. Unlike before, when they had scorned others for being impoverished, their clothing was soiled, a sign of their substandard living conditions. They were totally to blame for it. Since then, Sophia has lived in almost complete isolation, struggled to obtain employment, and felt hopeless about her future. It has been 3 years since then, and Mark, Caroline, and I share a home. Though Mark thought it would be safer for Caroline to live with me in case of any problems, Caroline should so fully live alone. Caroline and Mark, who are quite busy at work, frequently assist with home duties, and I much appreciate their assistance. I became nervous when Caroline came up to me one day and gave me a serious look. She then grinned and joyously stroked her tummy as she remarked, "It looks like I'm going to be a mom." "That's fantastic, Caroline. Many congratulations." I happily hugged her. Mark grinned broadly across from us. "Although I am aware that we have many obstacles ahead of us, I have faith that we can succeed. In addition, I'm excited to see our new grandchild. As I thought of our bright future, a grin automatically sprang